Hi, I'm Christian Triola, author of The Missing Method for Guitar books. And in this video, I'm going to go over 8 reasons why you should learn scales, and as many of them as possible. So I've heard some guitar players say they never practice scales, and that might work for them. And they may not need to practice scales because they have a really good ear, or they just have an innate ability to figure out what something should sound like. However, for most players, it's crucial to practice scales. And here's why. Reason number 1, it gives you a starting point. It's kind of like using a recipe. You have all these ingredients out there, but you can't just throw them all into a pot and call it food. You have to know how they all work together. And notes operate the same way. You just don't want to throw a bunch of stuff in there and call it a song, because you'll have too many things and it won't have a strong sense of unity to it. It'll just be all washed out and you'll lose some of the essence of it by doing that. So if you have a starting point, if you know a scale to start from or a recipe to start from, you automatically know what not to include. And by having that as a starting point, it can really help you to focus right away. Which brings me to number 2, it focuses your sound. So when you have an idea that you wanted to develop, it helps you to bring that in and gives you a better place to start from. So essentially, a scale is nothing more than a pitch collection, a collection of sounds. And so you're using that collection of sounds to create an effect, hopefully, in your listener. So the more scales you know and the better you are at using them, then the better effect you'll have on your listener. It'll become more intentional and gives you a solid direction. You know the basic sound and the basic idea that you want to go forward with. Reason number 3 is it helps you become better acquainted with your instrument faster. Scales are made up of musical patterns, and once you learn those patterns on your instrument, then you can pick up other instruments and apply those patterns once you know where those patterns are. For example, there are a lot of different ways you can play the major scale on the guitar. And it just follows a series of whole steps and half steps. So one way to do that is you could have C major way down here. You could play those same notes like this, up here. And you'll notice some of them are in different octaves, but they're the same notes over and over again. And you don't have to play them just like that. You can do other approaches where you have 3 notes per string, and all kinds of different combinations that will allow you to understand your instrument better. Because once you know that scale, you can then start seeing the relationships among the notes. You know that if here's your beginning scale note, the next string, 1 fret back, is always going to be the 3rd note of that scale. And then up here, there's the 5th note. Now you have an arpeggio. And then you can apply that to any key. Here's A. Here's E. All the same idea. So it makes it much easier to get around the guitar's neck. And then, of course, once you learn minor scales and modes and altered scales and all sorts of things, it then gives you an even stronger idea of where all your different notes are on your neck. Let's say, for example, you wanted to play the C major scale, and we'll just do it in this octave in 5th position, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now you could also start altering notes if you want to. Go outside that scale. C, D, E, F, maybe you'll throw in an F sharp, and G. Now you could just do that automatically without even thinking about it because it's just chromatic, going up and down. But when it's intentional, you'll understand the effect that's going to have on the song and on the sound of that scale. So you can be more intentional with what you're playing. And of course, that all just brings you back to, by knowing that, you know your neck better. You know where those F sharps are going to land, in, which was outside that scale in all these positions. So you could do that same thing. You could do it anywhere you want, just by learning that scale and learning where it is on the guitar's neck. Next, reason number 4, you'll really want to learn scales. It develops your ear. Each scale that you learn helps you recognize those sounds in other songs. You know, I just played the major scale, and I had that major scale with a sharp 4 in it. And if I took out the regular 4, you can hear it's a different sound now. It's mostly the major scale, but now we have a sharp 4 in there. Now the name of that is the Lydian mode. But if you didn't know that, you would at least be able to hear that it's a major sounding scale with something changed, and then you just listen for that change and figure out, oh, they raised the 4th note of that scale. So it helps to train your ear, gets it used to these different sounds, so that when you hear a sound that you don't expect, you can start figuring out, okay, well, what did they do differently here? How is this different from that point of reference that I talked about earlier? All right, let's go on to reason number 5. And that is, it helps with your creativity. Now, a lot of people think that creativity just, comes to you. Like all of a sudden, oh, I got this idea for a song, you write it, it's brilliant, and you make, 50 cents on Spotify or something. But really, what creativity comes from is through a lot of work, by knowing your source material as well as you can, and just working it and reworking it until you get the sound that you want, you get the effect that you want with your music. By knowing scales and being able to play them anywhere on the neck and in a variety of ways, it gives you the freedom to be as creative as possible. In fact, you can start taking those scales and altering notes. Maybe you would want to lower the 2nd. That gives you an unusual sound. And so it gives you a way of coming up with fresh ideas, fresh sounds that then you can use to create new music that maybe no one's ever heard before. So essentially it can help you write songs, solos, licks, melodies with greater ease because you have an understanding of how the scales work and the differences in what they are and how they affect the music. Reason number 6, it's kind of related to reason number 5, but it can help you to generate ideas. So knowing scales can actually get you out of a musical rut. So if you find yourself going to the same ideas over and over again, like let's say you're doing a blues solo and you just do, and you're like, man, I've done that in every single gig I've ever played, and you're tired of it. Knowing scales can help you get out of that rut. So now let's say you go from that pentatonic scale, maybe you'll change it into a blues scale. And so I just took similar notes, I changed it up a little bit, adding the blues note to make it the blues scale. And then maybe I would want to take that and add some other notes to it. So I kind of went outside that scale and started adding notes from what are essentially other scales in order to create interest for the listener. And for yourself, because sometimes you do get tired of hearing yourself play the same things over and over again. Number 7 on the list is by learning scales, you also start to better understand how harmony works. Because let's say you have a C chord, for example, and you play the C major scale along with that, you'll start to recognize that some of those notes fall within that chord, that arpeggio I was talking about earlier, and some of them fall outside that chord. And you can hear if you play a C chord and then you play D, F, A, the notes that aren't in that chord, it gives you a different effect. And in certain styles of music that would sound really cool. In other styles of music, it might not work that well. It really just depends on the type of music you're playing and the effect that you want to have in your song. And so by knowing what notes are in the chord, it kind of helps you know what notes aren't in the chord and how they can be used to kind of create tension or create moments of rest or resolution. All right, then finally, reason number 8, why you want to learn scales, it'll make you a better and more diverse musician. Let's face it, if you're coming up with your own solos or your own licks and you're just using one scale over and over again, you're going to kind of come up with your sound, but it's not going to have a lot of variety. So By knowing a lot of scales, it gives you a lot more to choose from, adds variety to your playing, which makes you a more diverse musician. Because, you know, if you're playing, let's say, some kind of country thing, you might just go right into something that's, you know, C major pentatonic. You know, but you could also go into a lot of other different sounds and different scales that will fit that and fit that style, but make it a little bit more interesting. So of all these scales, you might ask, well, what are the most important ones to start with? And really, the major scale and the pentatonic scale. Those two scales will get you pretty far, and they both act as strong points of reference for not only music theory, but for playing guitar as well. The pentatonic scale makes up probably 95% of the rock solos that are out there. It's also used in jazz, it's used in blues, it's used in all kinds of music. And so knowing the pentatonic scales is a great way to really dig in and learn your scales. Another way, of course, is by learning the major scale. Once you know that, not only can you come up with melodies easier, but you'll come up with solos faster, and you know, all the stuff I've been talking about earlier. And that gives you, like I mentioned before, a strong point of reference from which to build from. And that major scale sound is probably the most widely used sound in all of Western music. So do you have any other reasons or ideas as to why scales are so important to learn? I'd love to hear from you. So make sure you comment in the comment section below and let me know, what have I missed here? What are some other reasons why scales are so important to learn? Or why do you think, it's not really for me? If so, I'd like to hear your point of view on that as well. So if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And then once you're done with this video, go check out our website, themissingmethod.com. And if you sign up for our newsletter on that site, you'll get a free ebook. So keep that in mind. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. So keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next video.